Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And Jim, our good martini is kind of the same good martini we had earlier in the week, but it's even more fun because it's Hillary Clinton making herself look ridiculous when the allegation she's making has already been proven scurrilous, even by liberals. So, of course, we know that last week were the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. At one point, he quoted a case in which he said one of the clients in the case called birth control pills abortion-inducing drugs. Some of them actually are. Then Kamala Harris mischaracterized the quote. PolitiFact came out saying it was a false statement. Brett Kavanaugh did not personally say he believed that birth control was abortion-inducing drugs. He was just quoting what the position of the client was in the case. So now, several days after the fact, Hillary Clinton is weighing in, trying to whip up opposition to Kavanaugh, which probably suggests he's likely to be confirmed. Here's her Twitter rant. I want to be sure we're all clear about something that Brett Kavanaugh said in his confirmation hearings last week. He referred to abortion pills as abortion-inducing drugs. That set off a lot of alarm bells for me, and it should for you, too. Kavanaugh didn't use that term because he misunderstands the basic science of birth control, the fact that birth control prevents fertilization of eggs in the first place. He used that term because it's a dog whistle to the extreme right. When Kavanaugh called birth control abortion-inducing drugs, he made it clear that safe and legal abortion isn't the only fundamental reproductive right at grave risk if he is confirmed. Access to birth control is too. Imagine in America, sounds like Ted Kennedy, in which women are barred from getting IUDs or birth control pills, and doctors are criminalized for prescribing them. It's an America in which women will be punished for insisting on being full and equal partners in society. Jim, we expect Hillary Clinton to lie, but Hillary Clinton lying after the lie has already been completely debunked is even more delicious.
Yeah, this is very much on brand for Hillary Clinton, Greg. I have a separate question, which I'll just throw it out here before we get started. Why is it that only liberals can hear dog whistles to the far right? You really don't hear the far right people. Oh, he's one of us. That was a really subtle dog whistle there. I couldn't get that in the hearing. There are two possibilities here. The first is, considering the decision-making that was exhibited by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and in fact, I think you could argue throughout most of her political career, certainly during her days at the State Department, where everything has to be focus grouped and measured, and you got to bring in the legal team, and everybody's got to weigh in before we say anything. Maybe it just took her 4 days to get that tweet written and approved and checked and have everybody sign off on it because, Hillary Clinton is not a person so much as she is an entity made up of many, many Democratic officials and hangers-on and lawyers and apparatchiks and all of that. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but there really was this sense that there was a hyper caution to the way Hillary Clinton operated on the campaign a lot, particularly when it came to official statements, and maybe this is just more of the same from her. The other one, there's an idea that came out during the Obama administration. They called it the stray voltage theory. And the idea was to go out and say something that isn't 100% true or that's going to get you ripped over by the fact checkers, that's out of context or isn't really the case, but it works because the other side will object to it. You'll be a lot of screaming back and forth. And if nothing else, it calls attention to your issue you want talked about as opposed to the issues the opposition wants talked about. And I think, by the way, this is a chunk of the Donald Trump success. He tweets about something, and that's what the news cycle is going to be about, regardless of what else was going on in the world that day. I do kind of wonder if, like as somebody pointed out, it's really hard to believe that a good, 96 hours after this has been debunked, the Hillary Clinton team just happened to miss all of the fact-checking columns saying, well, no, he was actually quoting one of the plaintiffs in this case. There's nothing to indicate this is his actual view. He wrote the whole opinion there telling you what he think of it. So you don't have to go look for these hidden in between the lines subtexts of what Brett Kavanaugh thinks. The written judicial opinion is what Brett Kavanaugh thinks. But the idea that this in their minds, we're doing her a favor by talking about this, even though Hillary Clinton, Greg, you and I are saying she's wrong. Now, maybe this will work out for her. Maybe this does get us thinking about Hillary Clinton again. I'm not sure that's great for Democrats in general. And I would also note that you and I said Hillary Clinton is wrong a lot during the campaign, and it didn't really turn out the way she hoped.
As you said at the top, definitely acting according to brand. All right, let's move on to our bad martini now, Jim. And we talked with great frustration on numerous occasions last year in which critics of President Trump and Republican politicians got violent and got very little attention for it, with the exception of about 1, maybe 2 days of the congressional baseball shooting. We had the guy in Tennessee, Kustoff, who was run off the road. We had the neighbor attacking Rand Paul. Then Hodgkinson, of course, who shot up the baseball field and almost killed Steve Scalise. And now we have a situation out in California. There's a guy named Rudy Peters who is running for Congress against Eric Swalwell in the Oakland area. It's a heavily Democratic district. Peters doesn't have much of a chance, but he is the nominee. He was out campaigning at a festival, and a guy tried to kill him. Here is local CBS affiliate KPIX.
He would have stabbed me. I mean, he had it out saying, I'm going to kill you, MF, or I'm going to kill you. And he was, you could see his thumb trying to get the knife out.
Republican Rudy Peters is running for Congress. Over the weekend, he says he was threatened and attacked at his Republican booth at a fall festival in Castro Valley. He says it first started with verbal threats.
He picks up the coffee cup to rear back to throw it at us. And I jump around the table. He throws the coffee cup. It misses us. It hits the ground and breaks. So I come out and grab him and wrestle him and throw him down to the ground.
He says that's when 35-year-old Farzad Fazeli of Castro Valley pulled out a knife.
He's screaming, I'll kill you, MF, or I'll kill you, I'll kill you. And he's kind of circling me, trying to get the knife out.
And so the knife never activated on the switchblade. The lawyer and the mother of this guy who's now in custody says that it was really the congressional candidate who instigated the physical contact, Jim. So Eric Swalwell, to his credit, has tweeted out that he condemns such things, but very little attention in the media again. And, of course, if the roles were reversed, we say this every time, the name of this attacker would be, and his picture would be plastered on every 15 minutes on cable news. So what do you make of it all?
One point I think we should add to this description of events there, Greg. I'm looking at the Sacramento Bee coverage. It says, Kelly said Peters used a campaign sign to defend himself during the struggle over the knife. Don't let anyone tell you campaign signs don't come in handy, people. We don't need the expensive yard signs. You never know, right? You know, if you can't bring a gun to a knife fight, at least bring a campaign sign. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. Look, I think the point here is just glaringly obvious. And I think back to the Tucson shooting and the idea that we had this whole national, we need to change the tone of the conversation, and Republicans need to do some soul-searching about why their rhetoric inspires such violence, et cetera, never mind the fact that the shooter was a paranoid schizophrenic who believed that punctuation was an evil conspiracy and that nothing in his thinking could reasonably be connected to Republican philosophy, conservative philosophy, anything like that. Paul Krugman kept running around saying it was Sarah Palin's fault because of the map. As you mentioned, this is the fourth violent assault on a Republican congressman, senator, or candidate for Congress in a couple of months. And, not only is it not news, to the extent it's being, people are paying attention to it, Greg, it's just something that happened. There's no broader lessons to be taken here. No warnings about overheated rhetoric. It's just, sometimes people just get violent. Wackos, Greg, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about that. I can't help but suspect that had the roles been reversed, you'd see more of this. Another good, recent good example. Look, I don't like the way President Trump talks about the media. I think enemy of the people is the sort of term we should reserve for ISIS or Al-Qaeda or North Korea, except, Trump keeps saying the warm wishes he's extending over to Pyongyang. When the guy shot up the offices of the Annapolis newspaper, this guy had this long history of him behaving like, to use the clinical term, an absolute nut job. Lots of threats. This predated the Trump administration, predated Trump's campaign. This was a dangerous nut job who made lots of threats against this newspaper, completely unrelated to the Trump administration. It was very clear the way they covered him years ago. Because he was basically a stalker. He had stalked some woman he had known in school. They'd written an article about that, and he believed that the paper had, was out to get him. That's what made the guy go shoot about it. Everybody said, can you believe Trump's rhetoric led to this? Except Trump's rhetoric didn't lead to this. So I want one consistent standard here. And I can live very happily in a world that's got no holds barred. Anybody can say whatever they want. And we never see violence as instigating or promoting or fanning the flames of acts of violence, or I can live in a world where we want trying to have a more polite political conversation, a more one with more decorum, more common respect and courtesy towards others, no matter how strongly we disagree. I can live with either one of those standards, Greg. I just would like one consistent standard. And when, somebody pulling a knife on a Republican congressional candidate isn't considered a big deal by the national media, I think it's a rather glaring double standard.
Yes, that's exactly right. And one of the things that was not in that broadcast report, but is in the written report from KPIX, is that this man made disparaging, profanity-laced remarks about the Republican Party and President Trump. Remember, we got days and days and days of coverage because a rodeo clown wore an Obama mask?
Yeah, it was another good example. Now, if I'm an Obama fan, maybe that offends me, maybe it bugs me, but I don't think it reveals some dark heart of racism in the American soul or any of this. This ludicrous. I was making this point yesterday when we were discussing. When I was writing about hate crimes after 9/11. First year after 9/11, there were about 400 anti-Muslim or anti-Arab hate crimes, and I think it's very. I just state very flatly, in a better country, there'd be zero, right? There's no reason to run around committing hate crimes. No reason to run around committing crimes, period, right? Let's just observe crime is bad for anybody who wants to misconstrue my remarks. But the following year, it went out to about 200 a year, and it remained about level, jumped up after the 2016 election. If you want to attribute that to the president's rhetoric, I suppose you can go out and do that. But again, we have about 320 million people in this country, Greg. You're going to get some idiots. You're going to get some nut jobs. And when we have a hate crime against a particular group, the police investigate it. They try to catch the person who did it, and they try to prosecute them and punish them. We are a good country that tries to do these sorts of things. So, I don't. If you're looking for signs of darkness and hatred and racism in America, and you end up going to the rodeo clown, I don't think things are that bad, Greg.
All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now, Jim. And yesterday we offered some reflections on the 17th anniversary of the horrific 9/11 attacks. Other people had some different ways of tying in the 9/11 attacks to our present day, one of them being Joe Scarborough, who I don't know if he was still in the House of Representatives back then, but it was right around the time that he resigned. He, of course, is the host of Morning Joe. He's engaged to his co-host, Mika Brzezinski. He also wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post yesterday, essentially saying that Trump's doing more damage to the country than terrorists ever did or ever could. Here's Mika reading part of Joe's column.
16 years of strategic missteps have been followed by the maniacal moves of a man who has savaged America's vital alliances, provided comfort to hostile foreign powers, attacked our intelligence and military communities, and lent a sympathetic ear to neo-Nazis and white supremacists across the globe. For those of us still believing that Islamic extremists hate America because of the freedoms we guarantee to all people, the gravest threat Trump poses to our national security is the damage done daily to America's image. As the New York Times' Roger Cohen wrote the month after Trump's election, America is an idea. Stripped freedom, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law from what the United States represents to the world, and America itself is gutted. Osama bin Laden was killed by SEAL Team 6 before he accomplished that goal. Other tyrants who tried to do the same were consigned to the ash heap of history. The question for voters this fall is whether their country will move beyond this troubled chapter in history, or whether they will continue supporting a politician who has done more damage, and listen to this, more damage to the dream of America than any foreign adversary ever could. Couldn't agree more, Joe.
Whoa, stop the presses. Mika and Joe agree. Amazing. Just absolutely amazing. Jim, there's so many different ways to go with this. I'm probably just going to give you the floor here, but this is ludicrous. We don't like the way Trump speaks a lot of the time, but considering what he's actually implemented, whether it's his criticism of the press versus how Obama actually took action against members of the press and so forth, it's absolutely amazing that Scarborough would say it and then say it when he said it.
Yeah, there was somebody who had put on Twitter, and I think I retweeted yesterday, a very simple flow chart, which says, are you contemplating comparing something to 9/11 on September 11th of any date? And if the answer is yes, the response was, don't do it. If the answer was no, good job. Nothing is the equivalent of 9/11. Nothing really can be all that well compared to 9/11. Maybe we can make the arguments for Pearl Harbor or things like that. But this really is the sort of thing that I believe, should be held up and separate, and you can't compare not even your run, certainly not your run-of-the-mill political disputes, even your extraordinarily heated political disputes. It's a very interesting construction there, damage to the dream of America. Look, if you're going to compare somebody to Al-Qaeda and 9/11, I think minimum they should have killed at least 3,000 people, Greg. I think that should be the bar there. You want to compare ISIS to them, fine, because you should do that. Have you given lots of firefighters and cops and first responders cancer? No, then you're really not comparable to what Al-Qaeda did on 9/11. Have you destroyed buildings? Have you altered the New York City skyline forever? Look, there are a lot of reasons to criticize Donald Trump. You and I do plenty of them. I will probably do them for the remainder of his presidency. But to me, it's such an apples and orange. I remember as 9/11 was approaching, wondering if anybody would kind of make this kind of argument, because it really seems like two different problems or two different issues of two different eras. And I was thinking about Trump said after 9/11, now I have the tallest building in Lower Manhattan, which was kind of a dumb, obnoxious thing to say. You can criticize Trump, but ultimately when we think about 9/11, what happened that day, the way it altered America, the legacy, Trump is kind of irrelevant to it. And I don't think you necessarily have to drag him into our discussions of 9/11. When people say, oh, Trump has done so much damage to America, so much damage to the American dream, I won't even get to the Trumpian argument of, look at the good effect of the economy, look at the good effect of the tax cuts. I mean, we really have smashed the Islamic State over the last 2 years. I think doesn't that count for something if you want to compare about threats to the American dream? When you think about what's hurt the American dream, all right, maybe the Great Recession. All right, maybe that did a lot to cause a great deal of cynicism. Maybe the bailout. People getting the feeling and idea there's one set of rules for the people on top and another set of rules for everybody else. Those are the sorts of things that really do damage to the American dream. And it just seemed like it's such a weird comparison to make. Like, I hate Al-Qaeda. I hate Donald Trump. Let me do an op-ed arguing those two. It was really kind of interesting to watch Joe Scarborough sort of kind of back away from it during the day. I say Mika did not back away from it one iota. It's a stupid comparison. And you can't post-McCain funeral, Greg, talk about the need for bipartisanship, talk about the need to be better. We need to be better Americans. We need to be more civil. We need to be more respectful. We need to have more appreciation for our values. And our political opponents are as bad as Al-Qaeda. Right? You just can't make those comparisons there. And I think that's the blind spot. I've had days I've agreed with Joe Scarborough, days I've strongly disagreed with Joe Scarborough, and yesterday was certainly one of them. Because it just seemed like you rarely would get a more distilled essence of the Acela class. And I say this is a guy who used to take the Acela fairly regularly. This idea that a president that I don't like, who is enacting laws that I don't like, who's enacting policies that I don't like, making nominees that I don't like, is comparable to the worst terror attack in American history. It's self-evidently ridiculous. And I don't think Trump critics do themselves any favors when they make these kinds of frothing at the mouth, outlandish comparisons. In fact, I think it probably makes it easier for Trump because it makes it look like, can you see what kind of nut jobs I have as critics?
I think the Acela class is the perfect way to put it. We get frustrated. We send all these supposed conservatives to Congress, yet very little actually gets done in that direction. And Scarborough had a pretty conservative record while he was actually in the House. But he's a perfect example of how when you stay in Washington and New York too long and you rub elbows with the cocktail party circuit for all those years, ultimately they change your thinking way more than you're ever going to change theirs. And he is exhibit number one of that.
I'm just going to make one last thing to throw in here, and an example of Joe Scarborough is on one morning. I remember watching one, and there were two segments back to back. The first was about the debt and the deficit and spending. And Joe Scarborough was fighting with the rest of the panel. Mika didn't like what he had to say. The rest of the MSNBC gang that day did not like to say, he said, look, we have a spending problem. We need entitlement reform. We need means testing. You cannot guarantee everything for everybody. There is a reckoning coming, and this is continue, and I was like, yeah, you tell him, Joe. All right. It's like, oh, okay. And then, of course, it turned to gun control. And, of course, he, somewhere along the line, this guy who once represented a very deep red district turned into a pretty much mainstream liberal on gun control. Oh, why do people need these guns? How could anyone, need a gun like that? Never mind all the folks who, work the midnight shift in 7-Eleven, or the young women who have to walk home alone through a parking lot and parking garage and stuff like that. You can't empathize with that. All of a sudden it's, this gun culture in America is out of control. So for the first segment, I was like, wow, Joe Scarborough is really, really onto something. And Greg, for the second segment, I was like, wow, Joe Scarborough is on something.
And those first moments that you described are getting fewer and farther between, although I can't say I watch a lot of Morning Joe. Jim, always fun to chat with you, though. Have a good day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.